Kia ora tātou, morena kia koutou, tai mai ki te whakarongo tēnei kauhau, tēnei kōrero. Ara ko taku kaupapa tēnei, tūmatauenga me rongo i te whiwhia. Ka tūau ki runga i taku maunga nā taumata, ka titiro whakararara ki taku awa, i rere nei a Ōhine Matarua, taku marae a Tawarau, rongo kārai te whare tipuna, ko rangi mahana te whare o te ora. E ti te rongo nui te rongo, a te rongo pitahitai. Ko tū hoi te iwi, a tātua te waka, ko tū Williams ahau, kia ora tātou. Ko ai te kai arataki ako, mo taku rohe o te wairiki, rā waiwhero ki uta, tūkarere ki tai. And I want to talk to you all about my kaupapa, Te Mana Tāne. There's four whakatipuranga in this picture. Myself, my karaua, father, my son, my little brother and my nephew. Firstly, I want to acknowledge everyone that's involved in Te Pai Tawhiti. It's a challenging time, traumatic time even. So kia kaha kia tātou. I want to acknowledge the kaupapa of Bro-Vember, the mental and physical challenges that we face as men. So it's awesome to have this month to acknowledge it. And just to be clear, this kōrero is through the lens, proudly through the lens of a father, a son, a husband and a brother. Some of the kaupapa I'm going to talk about, Ngā Karapu Whutupōro, Māori Rugby, a forum I co-created, he Huinga Whatukura, for kaimahi e te wana o Aotearoa. I want to especially reference Papa Pirini for this kōrero tū ki Maui, rongo ki Mātou, the warrior and the healer. So that was a big part of my 3-month rangahau that I conducted this year. And also my well-known celebrity cousin, taku whanaunga Russell Peka, also he came in to support this kaupapa e wā. He's got a really cool kōrero too. So koina. Ko hei tēnei, a little bit of a background about me. So iau e pakeke ana. I was an army brat. I was born in Singapore. My father was stationed over there. Came back to Aotearoa. Lived in all the army towns. So Trentham and Wellington, Linton, Waiuru. And we finally settled in Tauranga Moana where he retired. Through my childhood, I went back and forth to my kuia and karaua and Ruatoki. Might have been my behaviour, could have inspired that. But one thing I've reflected on in the last few years is the lack of stability by constantly moving. I've written Jack of all trades there. So I know a lot of people in a lot of different places, but in terms of one place, not so much. So upon reflection, I think that's in some way, probably both positively and negatively, has affected me. I also became a father at a young age, while I was still very young myself. I was a selfish individual, and I turned a blind eye to a lot of that until it all caught up with me. About 4 or 5 years ago, encountered some very serious mental health issues. But through that, the beauty of that, I feel like I transformed, came out at the other side a lot better. And then this year I became a koro. When people say it's life-changing, I think they undersell it, because it truly has been. In terms of the Rangahau, my formal introduction, conscious introduction into Rangahau started in 2012 through the ICF, Internal Contestable Funding. That time alongside my colleagues of Hēni Morehu, Erita Kingi, Shelley Wani. I wasn't too sure what Rangahau was at that stage, but it piqued my interest because I love to learn. And when it came to thinking of a kaupapa, I was still playing rugby at that time, and I knew these institutions of Māori rugby clubs are very, very important in their communities, not to compete with marae, but to complement marae, and bringing our young people back and exercising their pride in their community. Obviously, there are negative aspects, but I think that speaks to the wider rugby culture, alcoholism, but generally and overall these Māori rugby clubs are hubs for the iwi and hapu. For me, I'm not a strong mahi kai man or a whai kōrero man, so this is one way to gain standing within my community and mana and pride and representation. I really enjoyed the aggression, outlet, and the camaraderie that I developed over those years. So we ended up conducting Rangahau alongside Dr. Ramari Reireti, 17 Māori rugby clubs with the Māroe Bay of Plenty. It was a huge project, started in 2012, finished in 2019, interviewed over 115 individuals, and sadly many of them have passed away, but I'm glad we got to capture these stories as taonga and legacy for their loved ones and anyone interested in this kaupapa. There was a framework. I'm not going to talk about it too much detail, but the Pauwhutu portal represented by goalposts, literally goalposts, at 6 pau that we will all be familiar with, tūranga waiwai, mana, ihi, mauriora, tahitanga, and whakapapa. I presented a MIPSI in 2014 in Honolulu and published the final book in 2020. Why I'm talking about this kaupapa is that it set the foundation not only for my rangahau, but for my interest in Māori male well-being. Fast forward a few years, and going back to one of my earlier slides around my mental health challenges, I made the decision to reach out to counselling services, and it's a decision I certainly don't regret, despite the very unhealthy constructs of what a man should be, the stoic, get on with things, don't cry, don't be open. But I allowed myself to be vulnerable, and it's something I'm very grateful for making the decision. So I reached out to my colleague, Linden Morris, fellow manager, but the idea of creating a forum for our male staff, gratefully it was supported by Te Marupanga Health and Safety, who funded an external professional to come in and facilitate these sessions. And we spoke about a whole range of things. Some were traumatic, kōrero, but many of them were light-hearted, and it really just provided that ahuritanga for our tāne. Just share a couple of success stories out of that. So we had one individual who spoke about the 180-degree relationship with his own son. It was quite strained. And while our rōpū can't take the credit for that, he did mention sharing of kōrero did help him. So myself and Linden saw this as a duty, really, as leaders in our rohe, to embody o whakatinanatanga o tēnei mea te kaimahi ora. As of a few other things, the funding dried up, and sadly this forum ended last year. And I guess that did actually set the foundation for this kaupapa that I'm going to talk about as well. So my collaboration with Te Mana Wahokura actually started last year in 2024, when I worked alongside external and internal kaimahi on the Tauira Māori Success Project. That ended in February, and then applications opened for the 3-month residency in May. And it really sparked the fire, the other kaupapa, so I put my hand up and fortunately was selected as one of the recipients, and really humbled and honoured that my residency specifically was named in Dr. Morehuma Tonu, the Tātou Papa, sadly passed away earlier this year. So, well, that was an honour, and well, that was a huge honour. It's also given me the impetus to really honour his name by doing the best job I could do. Ana mihi to Sasha McNeeking, Takuta Sasha, who guided me over this 3 months. And when it came to choosing a kaupapa, Māori Masculinity wasn't far from the manawa. So 3 months isn't really a long time, and of course, Wiki Manawa Haukura, they ripped me into some other projects, which I was happily obliged to do. But over this 3-month project, I mainly kaimahi from within the wānanga, Tāne Māori, but I did speak to Tāne Māori from outside Te Wānanga Aotearoa, really looking at what it means to be a Māori, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a Māori man. How do we flourish? Are we flourishing? What does flourishing look like? So I conducted 6 wānanga over a 3-week span, mainly within Te Pea Plenty, but also had one session up in Waikato. And through the literature review, as well as the wānanga, as well as my own perspectives, this framework was born. So, tūmatawenga me rongo I te whiwhia is a framework that I created through this analysis, and it's a Māori male well-being framework. I'd say it's quite simple at this stage. It's still evolving. It's still got room to evolve. But the main theme behind it is around balance. And I'm not going to assume everyone is familiar with the attributes of these two atua. The tūmatawenga, the warrior, the asserter, action, and rongo I te whiwhia, the diplomat, the harmonious, the peacemaker. And although they may seem like polarizing forces, they actually complement each other. And also acknowledging that we as Tāne Māori, well, we as Māori, inherently possess these characteristics of these two atua, acknowledging that at sometimes maybe out of sync, maybe too far in one aspect. So dialing it up or dialing it down to return to alignment. That's basically where I'm at this stage. I really love the potential of this framework. It does require further study, further mahi, but it flies in the face of what I said earlier around colonising constructs. We know that our tāne pre-colonisation were loving fathers, mihi to you, Janie, and your mahi. They lived in balance, and when balance was out, they done everything to realign. They acknowledged that misbalancing or unbalancing is an unhealthy thing, which I guess we all appreciate. Yeah, so that's where I'm at with this kaupapa. It's, like I said, it's still growing. And tangi whakamua, looking forward. So gratefully I've been given an extension. So I'm currently working on an article to submit to the My Journal. Shelley's given me till December the 1st to complete that. So I'm well on track. And I will be studying my PhD in 2026. I've already identified a couple of areas where I can apply this theoretical framework into practice in 2026. So that's exciting. But more importantly to me is that it's actually influenced my personal fathering ethos and how I role model that to my sons. But being actually articulating it to them so they can do with it what they will. Yeah, and that little girl there, she's never far from anything I do. Taka mokopuna. But koere noho e te whānau, it's my kōrero today. We appreciate your time, and if you have any pātai, happy to try my best to answer.
Kia ore te tungane, e mihi ana ki a koe, e au ngā mahi a tāhua, e au ngā mahi rangatira kia Rangahau I tēnei kaupapa nui whakaharahara. I love it. This is such an important piece of work, you know, revealing our Māori masculinities and bringing them back to, you know, hei oranga, you know, mō tātou, Diwi Māori. One of my questions that I had was what were the, I mean, Casey, we're just actually talking about it. What were some of the different demographics that you had in your wānanga, you know, and what were some of the main kind of things that came out that contributed to well-being for tāne Māori?
Pai, tēnā koe tuine. The demographics, actually, to be honest, it wasn't as diverse as I wanted. We didn't get a really strong youth voice, rangatahi voice. So other than kaimahi at the wānanga Aotearoa, I had a couple of social workers. I had someone working within the youth justice system, retirees. Yeah, so we did invite some younger men, but they, for whatever reason, they didn't eventuate. But in terms of flourishing, so when I opened up some of the wānanga, I just read some stats, and I got challenged straight away. So some of those negative stats that we all are familiar with. So well, that doesn't say who I am as a Māori man. Yeah, I don't measure myself on those things. So that was a good challenge, and I acknowledge that. But in terms of flourishing, reconnection to tūranga waiwa is a strong one. Acknowledging the interconnected self. Hey, we as tāne don't introduce ourselves as just us. We're always in relation to something or someone or someplace. So that was probably the main one, Janie.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful start. And yeah, we always like, you know, want to get different voices in, but it doesn't always work that way when you're in the throes of a Rangahau project. So, you know, that's the next project. But, you know, that's beautiful. Yeah, lovely.
I'll let my cousin talk more about himself, but me and Russell just reconnected last year, actually. We're second cousins. But yeah, it's awesome to have you here and the mahi you're doing in your space. Te whanaunga, Russell. And I'll pass it over to you. Kia ora tātou.
Ngi hana kia koe. Tēnei te mea atu kia koutou. Ko Russell Packer tuku ingoa. Uri tēnei o Ngāti Hawati. O Te Ata Haunui a Paparangi me Maupoko Ngāti Kuia. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, thanks for the invite, cuz. As Tu said, we just reconnected. Our nans are sisters, and we've never. I'm 36 years old now, and you know, 34 years of my life I could have walked past Tu and not knowing who he was. And if some of you are familiar with who I am, for those that aren't, I used to play rugby league professionally in the NRL for 16 years. I grew up in Te Awahau in the Horowhenua. I left Foxton when I was 16, just turned 17 years old, and moved up to Auckland to take up a rugby league contract. And yeah, I applied my trade as a professional rugby league player for 16 years. During that journey, I ended up in jail for a year. I was out of the NRL for 2 years, just due to a series of bad choices, compiling, you know, mental health issues and addiction to drugs and alcohol, and a lot of violent tendencies. As I was saying, Yeah, I grew up in Foxton. I thought that we were Ngāti Raukawa growing up in Foxton. I didn't know about my whakapapa or anything like that. And that's why, you know, up until a couple of years ago, I could walk past some of my, you know, really close whanaunga that just never come across or haven't been to different kaupapa and stuff like that. And I think that was due to, I haven't got a slideshow like Kazi prepared or anything, but a lot of the kōrero that he said around lack of stability, I experienced that probably in a different way. The more traditional domestic violence, alcohol, packing up and going with mum and living in 6 different houses kind of thing, and then coming back. So that was basically my life. Before I moved to Auckland, when I just turned 17, I think I'd lived in 5 or 6 different houses with my mum. We lived down south for a couple of years and went to a lot of different schools. So yeah, I experienced a lot of lack of stability within the household, and then naturally a lot of those experiences that I had as a child, you know, exposure to drugs and alcohol and violence from a really formative age, like, you know, 5, 6, up until when I was 16, 17, carried with me a lot. And I was really good at rugby league from a young age, and I guess my talent in that area masked a lot of problems. And I have a master's degree. I was quote unquote smart at school, but I was always getting in trouble and doing other stuff. But one of the frameworks or models that I had in my mind as I went through my university journey, I got a business degree, but a lot of Rangahau was performed with within the NRL, people doing their theses and masters and exploring and investigating the athlete population. And a master's student came who was writing his thesis, and I said, you know, if you put your problem on a scale, on a weight, and that's why Tu and Rongo as a balancing act kind of stands out to me, is you could have say a problem weight of 1 kilo, but your performance is a 10, and no one even cares. And this is the reality when you're a public figure and you do performance-based mahi for anything, whether you're an entrepreneur and you're a PhD and your research is phenomenal, but you got a whole lot of these underlying problems. As long as your performance outweighs it, you're normally kei pai, and that holds pretty well over most subsets of society. And this is something that up until, you know, a few years ago, like I'm in my mid-30s, I haven't really explored it that deeply up until then. And very similar to Tu, I've been in jail. I've been through a lot of addictions to, I guess, self-medicating addictions. I would describe them. Use of drugs and alcohol to kind of numb feelings and emotions. When I played at the Warriors, I was arrested basically every year without public fanfare, but every year for some alcohol or violent related incident. Again, goes back to what I said about I was really good and they were minor problems, and I was performing really well, so they were always kind of you know, swept under the carpet, so to speak. So and that's really when I landed in jail, I had a fight in Sydney CBD, and I got sentenced to 2 years jail, of which I served 1 year. Went all around New South Wales corrections. And in all honesty, I was 23 years old when I went to jail. I was still a child, still immature, selfish, all of those things that Kazi described about us as Tāne. Also had children very young when I was still a baby myself, still maturing. My daughter just turned 15 and my son will be 13 next month. So navigating all of that and the pressure and of being an athlete, really overwhelmed me sometimes, and I used to really just medicate a lot and just numb everything by taking a whole heap of drugs and alcohol. And it wasn't, even when I got out of jail, I didn't really commit to the counselling. Guess it was something that I was always adverse to, or what Tu said earlier, all of it on your own. And I grew up in Foxton Beach, and Foxton's quite a, conservative, small country town, rural town, if you know it. It's and a lot of the, why a lot of Tāne struggle is because they don't have a safe place. They don't have a safe community and a group to actually, what Tu said, be vulnerable and share some of the things that are weighing them down or eating them. And I've lived a life, full of different experiences, and from good ones and bad ones, but I'm grateful for them all. And I said this to Tu, one of the kaupapas, and I've spoken a few things around mental health, because I'm jovial and I like laughing and I can joke about most things, and most Māori men we got more sense of humour, and you know how to enjoy life. That doesn't always mean that you're not struggling, and a lot of people that are, have got a good sense of humour. You use that as a mechanism of coping as well, and I think that's probably been a blessing and a curse for myself. To going back to Tu's model was always having balance between Te Mana Tāne and Rongo, the dualities of myself of having violent tendencies, and those being valued when I'm playing rugby league, or say even for Tāne Māori, it's like we talk about our warrior, our toa, like you had to have the capacity for extreme violence, and a lot of our pūrākau contain killing and beheading and patu to the head and a lot of extremely violent stuff. And then how was that balanced now in 2025 with the society that we live in, which is something that I've probably struggled with as throughout my life, around using Te Mana Tāne as the only vehicle for myself to solve issues when they've come up. And as I've gotten older, as Kazi Tu said, you have, by default, as you get older, you learn more balance. But when you're in your early 20s, or when you're in your teens and you're a young red-blooded male, you're less listening, and you're more, particularly with some of the environmental, learnings and normalizations that we've had. I was told by my dad, hit first and ask questions later. And what Tu said about being a father, and even now having a moko, like for myself, having a son, I've never normalized that for him, and my children as well. I've never normalized the same things around the use of drugs and alcohol at a certain age, and the use of violence to resolve disputes and or even problems in their own life. And I've had a lot of alcohol and drug addictions, and anger management issues, and all of that stuff that affects quite a lot of our Tāne. And about 3 years ago, I've gone back and forth of drinking, not drinking. About 3 years ago, I stopped drinking and taking any drugs. So I've been, haven't touched any of that kind of substance. And it was around that time where I found myself being called and pulled back into Te Ao Māori, and understanding ko waio, who I am, where I've come from, who my whānau are, and probably more importantly, where I'm meant to go, or what pathways I should probably be following. And it was, I don't know, more like a vision, or like a calling, like you're doing the wrong things, and go a different way, and it's opened me up to so many experiences. One of the things I have underway is I have a documentary in the pipeline funded by Te Mana Tāne, where I'll receive a pūhoro and examine rites of passages for, I think around that time, a couple of years ago, I started working for Hauora, for Potiri Trust up here in the Bay of Plenty. So quite a big social service provider, and I was working, obviously I got like a master's degree, so I was doing quite a lot of the mahi in the back end, bid writing, helping to design and deliver some of the gang reintegration, kaupapa, things of that nature. And it really, we provided Potiri, had moko therapy as a healing modality for trauma, and Haram Hood was our moko therapist, artist, and just sitting with him, he actually sat with one of the bros that worked there. He's a bushman and real staunch, old school Māori, wouldn't see him crying and all this, and he actually lost one of his brothers, is the pōtaki of his whānau whāngai, and I had the honour and the privilege to actually sit in these things, and just hearing him, the stories that he shared, and the weight that he got off himself by going through that process of one, talking about it in a safe place, and then receiving moko, or receiving something as a positive adversity. And one of the other I guess concepts that I'd like to touch on in here, and I think it's quite evident in most of us, especially Tāne Māori, is that we almost crave adversity. We crave, a challenge. We by default, a lot of us were born, our whakapapa is tall whakapapa, warrior whakapapa, and we're always looking for battles. And my own self, if I haven't had a battle on the outside, then I'll create a battle on the inside, or then I start creating battles everywhere. And that's one thing as I've gotten older. I think that's why examining whakapapa, whakawhanaungatanga, tūranga waiwai, going and putting ourselves in places where we're exposed to some things that are difficult, but we move forward accepting that challenge because we're built for it. And without any challenge, I believe that's when a lot of our others start, and this is mainly from reflective of my own life, is without that stimulation and challenge, then we can descend into really chaotic and real destructive behaviors, and get into really really poor places with our mental health, which I've found myself in a number of times of in my life. And most recently, about 3 years ago, I was in a really dark place all around this time, and reconnection to Te Ao Māori, learning whakapapa has actually been, without any medicine or anything like this, that has been my medicine, going to different wānanga and I guess learning who I am, and then on the process, healing myself and preparing myself to move forward in whatever flourishing looks like. I know too's kaupapa was about what is a flourishing Tāne Māori mean, and that's different to everyone, and that's how it should be. But for me, it's providing that stability for my own tamariki. And I think one of the primary roles for us as Tāne Māori too is always protecting our whānau and providing for them. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget to do, but that's what we're built for as well. So that's what I measure myself on. Can I talk to my two babies? Can they tell me about their lives at school? Can I give them some guidance, or can I be there to listen to them? And I feel like that's what's flourishing for me, healthy relationships with myself, with my wife and my children, and then the rest of my whānau. So that's how I kind of view. If you look at it from a flourishing scale, it's start with the things closest to you, which is under your own whare, in your own whare, yourself, then your partner, your wife, and then your tamariki, and be the best. That's kind of, yeah, what I measure myself on, being the best version of myself. One, for myself, for my own mental health, and then for the people around me. And generally, when I'm in a good place, everyone else that I love benefits. So that's probably how I would sum that up. But yeah, me and Tu had a big kōrero about this, and it's something very, very near and dear to my heart around, I guess, normalizing and bringing awareness to what emotions are, and that's okay. One thing that just happened in my life recently is, again, a whānau member that we grew up together in Foxton, and I hadn't heard from him for a number of months, and I rang him and didn't answer, and I rang him and didn't answer, and he must be busy. I rang him, didn't answer. This is over a series of months, when you're in the car kind of thing, thinking of someone, like, give the kids a call. And then I rang him a few months ago, and he finally picked up, and he was kind of embarrassed to talk to me. He's real whakama, and it's like, bro, I've lost 12 kilos. Something bad in my business happened. I've been like depressed. That's like clinical depression. But he didn't want to talk to me. He was like, because he was one of those old school, that's for weak people. I don't feel like that ever, until it hit him. And that's actually what he shared with me. He was like, I didn't think this shit was real until I felt it. And I think that's another thing too, that I'm really, it's important for me too, is that, and that's the same like anything, until you've experienced it, you generally don't value it as much as others that have, and that's why providing a safe place for people that haven't experienced Kei Te Pai, they're on their own journey, but knowing that they're welcome to have a place to come in, have a kōrero, if they ever do fall into those kind of poor states of mental health. So yeah, that's I think I've shared enough about my life, and as Tu said, yeah, any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Kia ora, ko te arohara hau no Ōtiputi, he mihi nui kia kōrua, mo tō kōrero. I love that the tāne are embracing the learning pathway, because that's how we can grow in ourselves and for our whānau. And just thank you for a very honest and raw sharing of your journey. And I guess one of the questions I have, as we sort of looking to support our younger generations, is when we see our tāne really struggling at the age of 17, 18 through to 24, just as an age bracket, what is it that we can do to support them? Because a lot of the time they're so lost in that realm that as the people around them, we don't know what is the best thing to say or the best way to approach when we're not a guy. What's some suggestions there?
Yeah, I guess that's always a really, it's a bit paradoxical, isn't it? Like most of the kaupapa around supporting men's behavioural change or long-term behavioural change that are out there, like MSD have a program, Te Huinga Whatukura, which I was involved in with Pautiri, and then you do have a lot of wahine involved in the therapy, and you go, well, but you're not a man, so how can you understand a man? And I think it's a beautiful question, because, well, for myself anyway, when you're 17, 18, is that physiologically, psychologically, tāne are different from wahine. And what I've experienced in my life is that when you have boys that are down or sad, or myself, doing something, we're doers. And as what Tu said, like, atua tū toinga is of action. And then you have contemplation time, like as a duality, but for most tāne, doing things, getting out and moving is the most immediate po that I've found I guess in some of my mahi with myself and even with my son is like sometimes just walking without talking will give that space. And for me, you know, I got a really eclectic group of friends. Some people that are Pākehā that are 70, some, you know, young Māori, Asian, Indian, like, and I guess one of the common denominators between them is that sometimes we try to force people to tell us their problems, where my whakaaro was around creating a space where that they feel that, you know, it's safe and they'll just share when they're ready. And that's kind of how I guide. But doing that with movement is generally what I do. It's because when you're stuck, oh, you know, like you mentioned it at the start of the hui. Oh, we should have played music in the hui. Well, that's only in service of to limit any awkward feelings. And it's very similar to when you're in an elevator or something like this. Everybody be's quiet because it's like, oh, socially that's normalized to be quiet in there, and we feel awkward about that. We want to feel silence most of the times. I'm talking about humans in general. And sometimes when we feel silence, we limit the opportunity for someone who's trying to build up the courage too. And I think as facilitators or listeners or however we want to describe ourselves, to answer your question, is we've got to be mindful and have some awareness that if we take time, then we're also taking opportunity for sharing. And that's probably what I'll share is movement with the space, and no forcing, and understanding that silence doesn't need to be filled just because we feel awkward.
Ia, aja, whakautu ki tērā, pātai. Yeah, no, for me, because my boys have gone through that age group, and I can see myself and them and the challenges they face. But not only that, I can see their resistance to listening to me, which I had to my father, no matter what we know. But I just be clear with them. I know your mother's normally your go-to, but and the shit hits the fan, you can come to me for whatever, boy. And that's paid off for my two boys. And that myth of our men are not wanting to speak, yeah, that's been challenged or debunked, because our men are ready. We're not providing that space and time, as Russell was speaking to. Yeah.
Pātai, one from Upper and then Pua.
Good, Russell, just a quick question. You talked about when you were starting off at the Warriors. Do you think that if you were held accountable for those indiscretions that occurred early on, that would have made much of a difference in your life going forward after that?
Yeah, I guess like anything, this is a poor analogy, but it's effective, as no one stops drink driving until they get caught generally, you know, and it's one of those things, if you get caught earlier, you stop earlier, or you change earlier, you have the ability to change earlier. And that's very similar to myself. And as I said, I guess the ego and the arrogance that you need to go, hey, I'm going to be the best rugby league player in New Zealand, and that means I'm going to be better than everyone else. You have that kind of whakaaro where you don't care, and that bullishness that allowed me to play NRL when I was 18 years old, still a child, still a boy. You know, to contextualize that, I started playing men's league when I was 14, 15 back home in Foxton and Levin. So you get, it's a double-edged sword, I guess, and for people like myself, I guess boundary pushers or willing to take the consequences of behavior. People, this is another thing I'll share to probably answer your question. Entitlement is not, it has to be reciprocated to continue. So if I believe I should be treated this way, and 100 people around me don't, I change. But what happens generally is entitled behavior comes from the treatment of others, and that's what perpetuates it, which is to answer your question, I acted a certain way, and people around me supported me. And this happens not only in rugby league but everywhere, is that you'll succumb or you'll change your behavior to appease until you won't, and then that's when everyone changes. And generally the person with entitled behavior, aka young Russell, you just continue on because people you expect this, and they match your expectations, and as long as that happens, you'll continue that behavior. So that was very similar to myself. A whole lot of little things, and again, I guess my personality or my archetype, it's like I was told not to touch things that were hot, but I didn't believe anyone until I burnt my hand, kind of thing. So which probably goes back to the whole thing around tāne boys. We don't, like as Tu said, no, try to tell your son something, or just have a band-aid waiting for them, because they ain't going to listen to you. Say, all good, go on then, burn your hand, and then you just try to refrain from, oh, well, I tried to warn you, son, but you didn't want to listen. You want to learn your own way, keep the pie. I'm here to help you recover from the burn, kind of thing. And, I was a kid like that. I had a very real liberal upbringing where, driving I had my own car when I was 8, 9 years old, driving around Foxton Beach and motorbikes. And yeah. To answer your question in a roundabout way, I think for me personally, probably wouldn't have. It had to be a drastic lesson for myself, and I think probably the lesson out of that for most boys, because really if you listen from a young age, not all boys go to jail, not all men commit violent crimes, only a certain few do, and they make up the most. For the most violent, the amount of actually perpetration of crimes, one person commits a lot over their lifetime, not heaps of people commit one. And I think where we focus on is that you have the capacity to go really wide on your scale, and this is what you also have the opportunities to descend into chaotic states, or from the flip side is to come up and elevate yourself and others around you. And I think this is probably who I'm speaking to when I share my story. It's not the child that listens to their mum and dad every day, and that it's the kid, it's the hotatu, it's the kid on the edges. Like as a child, you go, oh, well, you can't say that, you're only 9, and the teacher's 30. Well, he said, doesn't matter if the teacher's 100 and you're 20, if they say something that doesn't make sense, it still doesn't make sense. And then, so that's probably who I'm speaking to. And so the would it make a difference? Probably not. Yeah.
Kia ora, not so much a pata, but I just wanted to share something. The kōrero that you gave about having to fill the room instead of like leaving it in silence, I appreciated that. It just resonated with something that happened yesterday. So I picked up my boy from playing volleyball, and I could see he's heavy, he's annoyed, he's upset. And I pester him. I'm actually really bad at it, but it's just something I do. I'm like, tell me what's wrong. And he won't do that in the first instance. Anyway, we had to do a few things, so I just gave him space. I left it, and then once it took a little bit, like a couple of minutes or so, but then he opened up that he was upset about the team because he lost. That's why he was upset, and he told me all the reasons why and all of that sort of stuff. And so that was really helpful. So I'll practice that more, of just making sure that I give him the space and the time that he needs to be able to share, because he will eventually. It's just I'm like, okay, just hurry up and tell me what's wrong. So yeah, but beautiful kōrero. I really appreciated all of that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you both, for especially for sharing. I need to go for another cocoa, Russell, for all of us. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your Friday, everyone.
Thank you, cousin Russell. Awesome, bro.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, cuz too.
Ka kite.
Awesome whānau. Ka kite.